My name is Jeremy Hawker, and today we're going to be continuing on with my specialty, which is multi-tonic chord changes. I've done a couple of videos on this now, and I've got, in which I define what these things are, so it might be a good idea to check that out before we get too involved, because today I'm going to look at the concept in a little bit more detail. So this is where it gets a lot more fun, in my view. Okay, so let's just look quickly at the definition, and this is the definition that I go through in the previous video. Okay, so again, I'm using Yamaguchi's definition, in which he says multi-tonic chord progressions are note groupings within their original key structures that project harmonic root motions of note groups of limited transpositions. So what does that really mean? Okay, in other words, it's basically the same chord of the same tonality, that projects root movement of the notes, note groups of limited transposition. Okay, so what? What's this note group of limited transposition got to do with it? Yeah, so basically I look at this in the other video as well. So again, if any of this isn't making sense, go back and look at that introductory video, because it will help you understand it. But basically, what the modes of limited transposition are is they're essentially symmetrical groupings of notes, symmetrical note groupings. So what that does is it removes hierarchy. So if we're looking at the diatonic scale, that's an uneven division of an octave, right? So we get hierarchy, we get tonality. With limited transposition, we've got symmetry within the division of the octave, or octaves in Messiaen's case. So what that does is it evens out the tonality and makes it quite ambiguous. So it gives you lots of tonics, so it's hard to tell one, hence being tonally ambiguous. Okay, so let's turn our attention to the most famous usage of this multi-tonic system, and it is what is commonly referred to as train changes. Okay, so what they are, that is an octave divided into major thirds, so that will give you the augmented cycle. Okay, so the augmented note grouping itself is a mode of limited transposition. As we know, we can only transpose that 4 times. Okay, and it's an even, it's got symmetry to it, so there's no tonality there. So that's what Coltrane was doing when he was employing these multi-tonic changes. Okay, so let's look a little bit more at how he actually applied them. So the train changes chord progression came from page 6 of Nicholas Slonimsky's dictionary, thesaurus rather, of musical patterns. Okay, so everything in there is symmetrical divisions of an octave. Okay, so what Slonimsky does is he takes each chord, and then, as you see here, a harmonization of the dominant tonic type will impart a feeling of tonality, even to a 12-tone progression. So he's taking each chord and putting its respective dominant before it. He's preceding it with the dominant, so it reinforces each one of the chords of the progression. And as Slonimsky argues, gives a feeling of tonality. Okay, this same pattern was also used in Richard Rodgers' Have You Met Miss Jones? So that's where they both got it from. Richard Rodgers studied with a pupil of Rimsky-Korsakov's. Slonimsky obviously was a Russian as well. So that's sort of where it came from. And Coltrane actually started with Slonimsky later in life. And he regularly used a lot of stuff from his thesaurus as practice material. Okay, so let's look at the giant steps chord progression, which is a typical example of, well, probably one of the most famous examples of train changes. As we can see here, we've got an E flat going to a G, which is a major third, and another major third to the B. So this is an augmented note grouping backwards, right? Which is the infamous train changes. As you can see here, it happens again. E flat's just another way of saying D sharp, which is a major third, and then another major third onto G here. Okay, in the latter half, you see here he reverses it, so he does the augmented chord cycle ascending. So he goes E flat to G, which is a major third, G to B, which is another major third, and then B to E flat, which is another major third again. Okay, so this chord progression, the train changes, are incredibly influential. And this work, Giant Steps, is a representation of that. Lewis Porter, famous biographer of Coltrane, said it knocked the jazz world on its ear, which it did, and some writers went so far as saying it put an end to the possibilities of chord changes. It's a pretty big call. However, Coltrane himself actually grew tired of this paradigm, as we can see here. Keith Waters summing up Coltrane's feelings about the progression that he instantiated. Okay, so basically that's the main sort of paradigm that's been used ever since within the jazz world. It's the go-to of the multi-tonic changes. Anytime you're talking about multi-tonic changes, you can fairly safely say that it is the giant steps augmented cycle that Coltrane used. I'm arguing that that was a very, very small application of the multi-tonic system. Great example of this is a work by Joe Lovano, which extends upon the Coltrane paradigm, and I've grouped it into 3 sections here. Okay, so in this first section here, you can see he's used a augmented cycle, so from B flat to D is a major third, D to G flat, F sharp is a major third, and then another major third backwards here. Okay, so that's an example of the train changes paradigm in this first box. Little bit different here in that he uses the dominant chord of the preceding chord here. So instead of using a D flat 7 to go on to the G major 7, he's actually used the 2/5 of the chord of the preceding chord, which gives the piece some interesting root movement. So straight away there we see some variation on the original Coltrane paradigm. Okay, but what's more interesting is if we look in the middle here, he has used a diminished cycle here. So B flat to D flat to minor third, D flat to E minor third, E to G minor third. So that's a diminished chord progression backwards. And this time he uses the 2/5 of the preceding chord. Okay, so a variation here, which gives us a perfect cadence as opposed to an interrupted type cadence up here. Okay, which is a nice variation. Okay, and then in the final section here, he's gone back to the augmented paradigm, and he's actually changed the key up a 4th. So instantly we see a lot of variation on the original Coltrane usage of it. So again, the claim that giant steps was sort of the be-all and end-all of multi-tonic progressions is maybe a little bit off the mark. These comments were made back at the time of its release, and we've moved on a lot since then. Okay, so what Lovano is using is what I call cyclic combination. So he's using a combination of cycles. Other works that feature this Sam Rivers, Cyclic Episode, Bill Evans, 34 Skidoo, and Coltrane himself, before Giant Steps, actually used this technique, although nobody talks about it. Okay, so we've looked at symmetrical divisions of an octave. So Coltrane was using this particular division of an octave. Yamaguchi and Messiaen take this concept further. So if we look at this example here, instead of dividing one octave symmetrically, Messiaen in his modes of limited transposition divided multiple octaves symmetrically. Okay, and this is a 3-octave symmetrical division as found in Yamaguchi. Yamaguchi labels all of these chord progressions. This is really good because it's jazz based. It's based in the jazz idiom. And you can see all the resultant chord progressions here. And he's labelled them with these cool little labels here, which is MTC, means multi-tonic change. And he goes on and he documents all the families of chord progressions that are based upon the note groups of limited transposition, which within that there are multitudes of chord progressions that can be used. And I will give you an overview, a little bit of shameless self-promotion. I'm forced to do this because this is the only piece that I can find. Well, I haven't seen any other people use Yamaguchi's chord progressions. If they do exist, please let me know, because I would be very interested in looking at them. But for now, we're stuck with my piece. Okay, so if you look here, I've used that 3-octave division here in the first 4 bars. That was Yamaguchi's MTC 3A.1. And I've used another one of his messianic note divisions here with 4B2. So you can look that up in his article and see how that works. Okay, down here I've used just a regular augmented row. I've substituted the dominant. I used a diminished dominant here. I do that every now and again. I like to do that. Okay, and down the bottom here I've used another ascending augmented row, and then down here is just a repeat of these two guys. Okay, so what we get is some pretty cool sounds. I have to say, these are very interesting sounds to work with, and I encourage you to check them out because they are really cool. And as we can see, they are a significant expansion upon the Coltrane paradigm. Okay, that's it for today. If you have any questions, hit me up. If you want to come and jam some of this stuff, I am always keen to play. I am insatiable. Alrighty guys, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.